Hi friends, my name is Alexis. I'm a freelance editor and I'm the owner of Oak and Dagger Editing. Today we're going to talk about 10 books that will help you get into the fantasy genre and what I love most about them. First and foremost, we have A Dowry of Blood, which is one of my favorite reads of last year. A Dowry of Blood is easily digestible because it is a Dracula retelling from the consort's point of view. The way that it's written is almost letter format, which helps you follow along with the storyline. There's very minimal world building, and the way that S.T. Gibson paints a picture in this book makes it so easy to fall in love with the characters, the world, and the story. Another book that I loved from last year was Wings So Wicked by Emily Blackwood, which I originally read as an ARC. If you're not familiar with what an ARC is, it's an advanced reader copy, so essentially you get the book prior to publication. This book is also really digestible in the sense that there are very minimal types of fae creatures, I guess, and the way that it's painted is really easy to follow along with. Once again, really minimal world building, but the way that she has intricately woven these twists and turns throughout the book was so well done that it definitely keeps you on your toes. There is a lot of that touch her and you get unalived, I hate you, kind of enemies to lovers vibes. So good. And also you can purchase this lovely cover on her website and it's just like a beautiful book altogether. I feel like a lot of these recommendations are just like vampire recommendations, so it comes as no surprise that King of Battle and Blood is on this list. King of Battle and Blood is also enemies to lovers, a lot of really intricately woven storyline, plot line, but this has more world building than the last two. The world building, however, is so well done that you almost forget that that's what's happening. And the lore that is intricately woven into this book is entry level, but also really well done. The second book I wasn't like a huge fan of, but I almost feel like I went into it with clouded judgment and I should probably reread it. But the first book really blew me away, so I highly recommend this book. I love Serpent in the Wings of Night. These books were my favorite reads of 2023. And Serpent in the Wings of Night was just such a good story. I have yet to read the third one, but the first two are just so interesting. They incorporate a lot of different elements of like vampire-esque type of storyline, but there's more to it than just that. And these like hidden backstories. The world building in Serpent in the Wings of Night is going to be a little harder to digest than the other three that I have recommended to you, but honestly, it's not as difficult to digest as something like When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. These books are really well done, and I think once you grasp the world building in the first book, the second book is way easier to follow along with. There's a lot of like wonderful spice in this book. Spice that I literally still think about 2 years after reading it. And I remember just being so obsessed with the characters in this. I was obsessed with this kind of like gamey feel, like fight to the death. And she goes into these like games without her father's permission. She makes friends along the way. She has the best like spice of her life. It's so freaking good. If you have not read this book, you need to read this book, please. Even if you're not even trying to get into fantasy, if you don't read this book, you're missing out. Moving away from vampires and moving directly into demons, Kingdom of the Wicked. This book is so freaking good. And honestly, if you look up character art for the man in this book, you're gonna be like, I need to read that right now. Why have I not read this yet? I looked up fan art after I read this and I was highly attracted to the man in this book way before that. And then I looked up the fan art and I was like, hello? Hello? The dark aspects to this, the like witchy magic-y feel, so freaking good. I'm so excited for book 2. I haven't read it yet and I'm beating myself up for not reading it yet, but this book, top tier. Top freaking tier. This is a bit of a hear me out because I haven't read book 2 yet. There's a bit of a glare, I'm so sorry. This is Guild. This is from the Plated Prisoners series. I hear it gets way better as you go along. This first book is a lot of setting up the story. It is way easy to digest. I do recommend it for beginner fantasy readers because the first book is so easy to follow along with, and because it sets up the story, it's going to make the other books way easier to follow along with. So if you like a girl who is cherished but also trapped, and the intricacies of that and her finding her freedom, you'll want to read this one. Listen, I have friends who did not like this book. Personally, I loved this book. I loved this book more than the second book, in my own personal opinion. Other people will disagree with me, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. You're entitled to your own opinion, but I liked the first one the most. Because Caraval is essentially a game that you play and you want to like win a prize, and it's this huge thing and all these people come out to it, and it's about this pair of sisters who go to play Caraval. One of them is taken and the other sister's motive is just to find her sister. And honestly, I really liked the gamey feel of this one. The second book is more romance driven, so if you like more romance, you'll probably like that one more. I personally liked the fantasy aspects of this first one. I'm excited for book 3 though. Okay, we've talked about vampires, we've talked about demons, now let's talk about pirates. The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. Hello. This book is so freaking good. I waited so long to read the first book and I still have yet to read the second book, and it left on such a cliffhanger. But the relationship between these two characters is so incredible, and their like childhood encounter into their adulthood, wild. This book was wild. This was a wild ride. I highly recommend it. It's about these like two kingdoms, and there's a lot of misinformation that the main female character has been given about like the people and the place that they come from, and she discovers that a lot of it's not true, and there's a lot of hidden stuff that they've kept from her that she uncovers, and the ending is the biggest cliffhanger ever, and you want to scream from the rooftop. You have to read this book. And there's only 2. It's a duology. I almost said this was a series and it's I almost said this was a trilogy, and it's definitely not. It's a series. So, A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. This book was specifically written by someone who was indie and promoted their book primarily on TikTok. And I find a lot of respect for people like that, because it takes a lot to market your book and it takes a lot to be an author. And honestly, did this book have some questionable things in it? Like the pacing was weird at the end, sure, but overall this book's storyline was really well done. It low-key gives like any fantasy book about like an assassin, it gives those vibes, which I personally love those vibes. But this one's way more digestible because the world building isn't as insane and the characters are more believable and likable. And honestly, I really loved this book because there is representation as far as like bisexual characters go, and that really made me feel, as a bisexual woman, like included, you know? And I think maybe personally that's where I'm getting a lot of love for this book, but I loved this book, and the second book was really good too, and I'm excited to read book 3. You should read this book. Last and certainly not least, House of Bane and Blood by Alexis Maynard. If you really liked Peaky Blinders and you like that like 1940s feel of a book, you are going to love this book. There are magical elements. Her family owns like the train company or something along those lines, and there's these warring families in the same city. She's supposed to marry this evil man and ends up falling in love with the villain who nobody wants her to be with. Who doesn't want to read that? Who doesn't want to read that? I have yet to read the second book in this as well. I don't know why I haven't finished these series, but this first book was so good. I literally could not stop talking about it. I'm obsessed with this. There was one thing in this book that I was like, but I think that kind of comes with the territory when I've read as many fantasy books as I have. But overall, this story was incredible and I highly recommend it. At the end of the day, if there's anything that you know about me, it's that I am a huge fantasy girly and I love to talk about all of the fantasy books that I've read. So if there's ever a time that you need a recommendation, just give me a little bit of a backstory on like what kind of fantasy you typically like, what you're trying to get into, and then I can adjust my recommendations based on that. But I love to give these types of recommendations. So if you have an idea for a video in the future or something that you'd really like to see, please put that in the comments down below. And I'm so glad that you watched my video all the way through, and I can't wait to see you guys next time. Love you, bye!